Good evening, and welcome to the Rachel Maddow Show. I'm Rachel Maddow. Tonight, we're diving deep into a story that's unfolding right at the heart of our justice system, the United States Department of Justice. If you've been following the news out of Washington, you know that the DOJ is in turmoil, and it's not hyperbole to say it's facing an existential crisis. We're talking about unprecedented levels of turnover, with thousands of attorneys either quitting or being fired in just the first 10 months of this year, 2025. Let me put that in perspective for you. According to a detailed analysis by Reuters, which has been tracking personnel records at the DOJ, approximately 2,900 attorneys have left the department or been terminated since January. That's not just a statistic, that's a hemorrhage. Historically, the DOJ sees attrition rates in the low hundreds per year, even during transitional periods between administrations. But this is triple, maybe quadruple the normal rate, as sources within the department and former officials have confirmed in interviews with outlets like the New York Times and NPR. And folks, a majority of these departures are voluntary resignations, lawyers walking away from what was once considered one of the most prestigious gigs in the legal world. Why is this happening? Well, let's connect the dots. This surge in exits coincides with the second Trump administration's aggressive reshaping of federal agencies. Remember, back in 2017, during Trump's first term, we saw similar purges, but nothing on this scale. Now, with figures like Attorney General Pam Bondi at the helm, the department has prioritized initiatives that many career civil servants view as politically motivated. For instance, the Civil Rights Division, once the crown jewel of the DOJ, responsible for enforcing voting rights, housing discrimination laws, and police accountability, has lost about 75% of its attorneys this year alone, according to Reuters reporting. That's not a typo. 3/4 gone. Former employees have described it as a coordinated effort to drive them out, with reassignments to peripheral roles or outright pressure to leave. Think about what that means for institutional knowledge. The DOJ isn't just a building. It's a repository of expertise built over decades. The thin cadre of go-to experts, those who've spent 10, 20, even 30 years mastering complex areas like antitrust, national security, or environmental law, are disproportionately among the departed. Harry Litman, a former U.S. attorney and top DOJ official, whom we'll hear from later in the show, puts it starkly. These aren't just routine retirements. These are the institutional memory keepers being forced out or warehoused in meaningless positions. For example, the Public Integrity Section, which handles corruption cases against public officials, has dwindled from around 30 attorneys to just 2, and even those 2 are sidelined from meaningful work. This isn't abstract. It's having real-world impacts. Cases are stalling because there's simply no one left to prosecute them effectively. In the federal programs branch, which defends government policies in court, 2/3 of the lawyers have quit since the election. That's 69 out of 110 gone. Fun yawn. Imagine trying to litigate major policy challenges, immigration enforcement, environmental regulations with a skeleton crew. And it's not just the numbers. The remaining staff are often demoralized, pushing paper on cases they see as antithetical to the department's mission. Let's zoom out for a historical parallel. Back in the Nixon era, during the Saturday Night Massacre of 1973, Attorney General Elliot Richardson and his deputy resigned rather than fire Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. That was a shock to the system, but it was contained to a handful of top officials. What we're seeing now is a wholesale gutting, reminiscent more of authoritarian playbook tactics where loyalty trumps competence. And sources tell us this is deliberate. The administration has reassigned or sidelined dissenters, focusing resources on pet projects like cracking down on perceived enemies rather than core crimes like drug trafficking or financial fraud. One chilling example: the antitrust case against a major concert ticketing company that was built up meticulously, only to see the defendant, a friend of Jared Kushner, pardoned shortly after charges were filed. This pattern of building cases only to drop them when politically inconvenient is eroding the very foundation of justice. And as we'll explore in the next segment, this chaos isn't limited to the DOJ. It's spilling over to the FBI as well. But before we break, consider this. The DOJ was once a place where lawyers felt honored to serve for the United States. Now, juries and judges alike are questioning their credibility. Stay with us as we unpack the FBI parallel crisis. This is the Rachel Maddow Show. Welcome back to the Rachel Maddow Show. If the Department of Justice is bleeding talent, the FBI, its investigative arm, is in outright revolt. Reports from NPR and Reuters indicate hundreds of agents have been fired or forced to resign since the start of 2025, with numbers climbing into the thousands when including support staff. CBS News sources even pegged a single wave in September where 800 employees, including several hundred agents, were separated from the Bureau. This is massive triple or quadruple the typical annual attrition, mirroring the DOJ's woes. Under Director Kash Patel, appointed amid controversy, the FBI has undergone what veterans call a purge. Dozens of agents involved in high-profile investigations from the first Trump term, including those related to January 6, have been ousted. PBS reported that more leaders, including a former acting director, were forced out for resisting orders to turn over sensitive information. The FBI Agents Association has argued these firings violated due process, filing lawsuits alleging retribution. This isn't random, it's targeted. Agents who probe Trump-related matters have been hit hardest, with Reuters noting 4 more firings in November tied to those investigations. Wikipedia's entry on 2025 federal mass layoffs tracks over 58,500 cuts across government, with the FBI prominently featured. USA Today and Politico detail how heads rolled, including the Washington field office chief. The human cost is staggering. Former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe described the Bureau as in utter disarray, with agents terrified about losing pensions and health care. Many are in shell shock, unable to do meaningful work. This echoes the DOJ's issues. Experienced agents sidelined, resources redirected to politically charged priorities like immigration raids over espionage or trafficking. Historically, the FBI has weathered scandals, think COINTELPRO in the 1960s, or the post-9/11 reforms. But this feels different, more like a deliberate dismantling. Ex-posts from users like at SDS LLC, USA lament no firings or charges under Patel, while others predict mass resignations. One post from at Club America 2025 notes 1,000 agents transferred, flooding DC real estate. The ripple effects, investigations into serious crimes lag. As Harry Litman notes, the survivors are pushing paper on garbage cases. This sets up our next segment, how the staffing crisis is leading to skyrocketing case dismissals. Stay tuned to Dot Back on the Rachel Maddow Show. We've covered the exodus at the DOJ and FBI. Now, let's see the fallout in the courtroom. A federal magistrate judge in Washington, D.C., analyzed felony dismissals over recent months and found a shocking 20% rate versus a historical average below 0.5%. WUSANN reported U.S. Attorney G9 Piero's office dismissed 11 felony cases in 1 month alone. Reuters highlights unprecedented errors eroding credibility, with dismissal rates hitting 21% in D.C. since crackdowns began. Judges cite unlawful searches and prosecutorial missteps. NBC Washington notes nearly a dozen drops from Trump's D.C. crime surge. In one case, Judge Zia Mfarukwi rejected an unprecedented indictment as facially invalid. Another, U.S. v. Kevin Stewart, saw dismissal under federal rules. OPB reported judges pushing back on the most illegal search. This ties directly to staffing shortages. With experts gone, cases are refiled multiple times, dismissed without prejudice, then with prejudice upon resistance. In L.A., a protester's serious charges ended in acquittal due to jury distrust. Judges like Emil Bao in the Mayor Adams case demanded personal sign-offs on dismissals. Judge Zinnes excoriated the DOJ in the Abrego Garcia case. No true bills from grand juries are now weekly occurrences. Resources are misallocated, pulling agents from roofs for immigration, ignoring trafficking. This echoes Watergate-era distrust, but amplified. Next, high-profile fumbles like Comey and James. Welcome back. Tonight, we're examining emblematic failures, the DOJ's botched pursuits of James Comey and Letitia James. The department appealed dismissals of charges against both, but indictments failed repeatedly in Norfolk, Alexandria, and elsewhere. Comey's case involving alleged false statements was dropped. James's on financial fraud similarly collapsed. These are seen as politically driven dog cases per Litman. In LA, a taped protester case ended in jury nullification. We just don't trust you, DOJ. This distrust stems from perceived weaponization amplified by Epstein cover-up perceptions. Defense lawyers now invoke this in closings. This is a weaponized DOJ with a political agenda. Conviction rates plummet even in strong cases. Broader shifts resources to go after long-term residents, ignoring fraud or integrity. The ticketing pardon exemplifies interference. Litman, from his experience, calls it understated impact. Vital divisions gutted, cases garbage. This leads to our final segment, eroded trust and repair challenges. Finally tonight, the bigger picture. Public trust in the DOJ and FBI is shattered. Juries ignore evidence. Judges excoriate prosecutors, a far cry from when, for the United States, commanded respect. Litman describes a post-apocalyptic landscape for repair. The DOJ, the world's largest law firm, had an impenetrable reputation. Now it's viewed like a disbarred lawyer. Everyone from former feds to the public knows scandals abound, but this meat grinder in 10 months is unprecedented. Survivors are shell-shocked, unable to work. Rebuilding? Hard like a cruise ship turning, but necessary for democracy. As Ben Meiselas and Litman note, it's sad but reportable. Thanks to Harry Litman, subscribe to Talking Feds. And to you for watching. Good night.